Welcome to the video for lesson 4, summarizing deviations from the mean. Deviations is basically how much different they are from the mean. So we are on page 24 in your workbook. Let's go ahead and get started right away. A consumer's organization is planning a study of the various brands of batteries that are available. As part of its planning, it measures lifetime, how long a battery can be used before it must be replaced. Or, I think that makes sense, but I also think in our current society, we're used to batteries that can be recharged. So one or the other. For each of 6 batteries of brand A and 8 batteries of brand B, dot plots showing battery lives for each brand is shown below. All right, so we have some questions. We have these dot plots, and we're going to answer them. Does one brand of battery tend to last longer, or are they roughly the same? What calculations could you do in order to compare the lives of the 2 batteries? So, we could find the mean, we could find the median, but I think if we're just talking about how much their overall battery life is, I think the mean or the median would be fine. We actually do know. So first of all, I'm going to just say, let me get a different color here. They are the same. They're about the same, I should say. And then, so we have the mean for brand A is, if you add all these up, these dots, so we've got 83, 94, 96, 106, 113, 114, add them up, divide by 6, I believe there are. You get a mean of, for brand A, 101. Let me just make sure. Yeah. And then for brand B, it's 100.5. So they're about the same. And then we'll actually even take a look at the median for both of them on the next page. So do the battery lives tend to differ more from battery to battery for brand A or for brand B? In other words, if you're looking at like the batteries that lasted the least amount of time and the longest, is there a bigger change more for brand A or for brand B? And if you look, the dots show there are definitely more changes for brand B. So brand B has a greater variability. So I'm going to type that in here. So the variability for brand B is greater than for brand A. Would you prefer a battery brand that has battery lives that do not vary much from battery to battery? Why or why not? Of course, you want something more consistent. You don't want to take a chance on a battery that is not going to last as long. So I think most people would want to, or at least if you're going to spend more money, you'll spend more on a battery that well, it might only last this long, but it's definitely going to be within this range, not this range. Whereas with this range, if it's closer to the lower end, you're losing out on money. All right, so I'm going to pause the recording. I'll fill in this answer, so make sure you check yours, and I'll meet you over on the next page. Okay, the next thing we are going to do is on the next page, page 25, calculate the deviations from the mean for the remaining values and write the answers in the appropriate places. So here's the mean for, this is brand A. So I wrote it down, 101. By the way, just for curiosity, the median, they didn't ask for this, but we should get in the habit, is in between the 2 middle numbers. Because there's an even number, it's the 2 in the middle. So if I add 96 and 106, I get 202. and divide that by 2, and it's 101. So the median and the mean are the same here. Now, how do I find the mean? Or excuse me, the deviation from the mean? Well, this 83 is below 101. So by how much? 18. So I'm going to write negative 18. And this 94 is below 101 by 7. 96 is below by 5. 106 is above by 5. And then 113 is positive 12, and 114 is positive 13. So that's how we're looking at the deviations here. All right, so the next table is actually already filled out for us. So we're going to take a look at these questions. Go ahead and read them. I'm actually going to fill some things in, and I'll pause the recording. When we come back, we'll talk about the answers. Okay, we're back. So I added some details to this table that was already filled out for us. I always like to write down the mean. By the way, these are the dots for brand B. So if you added all of them up and divide by 8, because there's 8 of them, you'll get 100.5. The middle two numbers, 94 and 110, add them together, you get 204. Divide by 2, it's 102. There's your median. All right, so now we have a brand C, and I want to show you something. So brand A, I put a mark here where the mean is, because if we look at the next question, we're going to see something. And then I circled the dots for brand C so we could see them a little better. Whoops. Which brand has a greater mean battery life? You should be able to answer this without doing any calculations. Clearly, most of these dots are above 101. Only one of them is below. So those are going to pull the mean for battery C or brand C higher. So the answer for that one is brand C. Which shows greater variability? In other words, which one is spread out more? Variability, if we're looking at a dot plot, is going to be which one is spread out more. If we're looking at like a histogram, it's going to be which one has like higher bars, and well, actually, which one is spread out more on the histogram as well. But it could be the bars as well. So obviously, this is going to be brand A. All right, I'm going to pause the recording, and we'll come back on the next page. Okay, over on to the next page. Question 7, which brand would you expect to have a greater deviation, variability from the mean? In other words, which one is spread out more? And then we're ignoring the signs of the deviation, which, keep in mind, that's basically saying absolute value. In other words, we don't care if it's positive or negative. We just want to know how far away from the mean it is. So when I go back to the dot plot here and look at all these dots for A and where the mean is, and all the dots for C, even though I haven't calculated the mean for C yet, if you look, these dots are definitely all bunched together a lot more compared to brand A. So the answer for 7 is A. And the next part, I've already pointed out, because there's 5 values, the median is going to be, actually, I might be wrong. Oh, I got lucky. I assumed that these values were in order, and they're not. I just noticed it. But 98, 106, 112, 115, and 119, if I were to put them in order, 112 is still the median, so I got lucky there. We're going to calculate the mean. I'm going to have you do that, and then fill in the table. So I'm going to pause the recording. You pause the video. Try to answer 8, fill in the table, and actually it would be 9 as well, writing the deviations. And when we come back, we'll compare answers. Okay, so I just wanted to show you a little calculator stuff that's going on. So I plugged in all the values. Now be careful, because I didn't use parentheses here. If I were to do divide by 5, because there's 5 values here right now, this calculator would do 106 divided by 5 and then take that answer and add that to all the other numbers. I don't want that. I want this total first, so I have to hit enter, then divide by 5, and I get 110. So be careful, just a little tip when using your calculator. Or You could have used parentheses around all of that, because think of order of operations. You do your parentheses first. But very important, because students are going to get these unreasonable answers, and sometimes you may not even notice, which you should, because an answer like that wouldn't have made sense. But 110 does make sense, because most of the values are a little above or a little below that. So here are my answers. I filled in the table. I wrote my mean. I put because it did say include the units with your answer. So I did all that. Now, going down to number 10, ignoring the signs, are the deviations from the mean generally larger for brand A or for brand C? So again, brand A, and then yes, it's the same as what I put for question 7. Okay, we are on to actually the last page, last two, because the next page has graphs we're going to use. So I'm going to pause the recording and I'll meet you there. Okay, a couple things I want to show you. So over on page 27, the lives of 100 batteries of brand D and 100 batteries of brand A were determined. The results are summarized in the histogram. Now, what's tricky about a histogram is we can't technically get a mean from this because we don't have all the individual values, but we're going to estimate where it would be based on this graph. Before I do that, I also want to point out, look at this down here. Some of you may not have ever seen this before. This is what's called a break. Actually, I should look to see if there's another name for it, but essentially that's telling me that my scale, because if you look, this is counting by tens going up each interval here, but the first interval goes from 0 to 85. You need to make your scale consistent, but you are allowed to use one of these to help pull in your graph or bring it closer. As long as you only do it once, you're okay. All right. So this is called a break, and basically it allows you to cheat a little when you make a graph, like a histogram. So what I'm going to do is, since I don't know what my mean is, and I'm going to need it, because if I go over to page 28, the first two questions are estimate the mean for D and for E. So I'm going to do that. I'm basically going to say, well, these are pretty much symmetrical. So because it's symmetrical, my mean for brand D is probably in between 105 and 115. So that's probably like 110. And for brand E, same thing. It's probably right down the middle here, which means between 125 and 135, which is about 130. So going over to my page 28, estimate the mean for brand D, we're going to say about 110 hours. And for E, it's about 130 hours. Make sure you include your label. Okay, there are 3 more questions. Try answering them on your own. I'm going to fill in my answers. I'm pausing the recording, pause the video. When we come back, we'll compare and see how you do. Okay, here we go. Let's wrap this up. So for question 13, essentially the variability for the two brands is roughly the same. So we'll move on to number 14. Estimate the largest deviation from the mean for brand D. So here's what I said. I looked at my graph for brand D, and I looked where it could possibly the furthest away from the middle. And what I see is this interval 135 to 145. Now, we don't know. There could be this value here could be 136, or it could be 144. But if we're talking about what could be the largest possibility, it would be, I guess, 145. So if my mean is 110 and my possible largest value is 145, I subtract and I get 35. So the largest variability is about 35 hours. What would you consider a typical deviation from the mean? So when I go back up here, again, I looked at both sides of this and I said, okay, well, halfway between the mean and the lower end is